Good morning, you guys. How are you doing? I'm going to talk to you guys today about sugar, and I want to do something a little bit different than what you might have heard before about sugar, because I find a lot of the times when I talk to people about sugar, they know it's bad and they know they should probably have less of it, but I'm one of those people that I like to know why. Tell me why. Why is sugar so bad? What is it actually doing inside my body? And I found that for the longest time, until I was able to wrap my mind around what it was actually doing to the inside of my body, that I didn't really ever process it beyond just the fact if I should eat less sugar. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about 3 reasons why you should consider putting down that donut at lunch if it's sitting around the office, or whether you make a trip over to Tim Hortons or wherever you're getting your donuts, and can reconsider that extra sugar in your diet. So if we have not met before, welcome. My name is Tessa Shears. I'm a weight loss coach for women. I help provide strategies and tools to help you reach your healthy weight, feel amazing in your body, and stop overeating. And sugar, it plays into the overeating. I promise I've got strategies and tips for you, so let's jump in. We're talking about the 3 reasons that you should stop eating sugar, or if you're eating a lot of it, really consider dropping that amount that you're eating. All right, number 1, because of how it affects your hormones. Let's just start there. So we have a hormone in our body called insulin. You've probably heard it before. A lot of the times it's associated with diabetes. Insulin is a hormone that has 2 jobs. Number 1 is it helps regulate the blood sugar in your body, and number 2, it helps store things as fat. So that's the purpose of insulin. So when we eat sugar, and this goes for actually starches and flours as well, but we're going to stick to sugar today. When we eat sugar, what happens is we ingest it, it goes into the bloodstream, our sugar levels in our blood come up. So what that does is it tells the body we need to produce more insulin, because insulin's job is to get blood sugar into the cells to bring our blood sugar back down to a normal level. So the problem is that sugar tends to really spike up insulin levels and make them very, very high. Now, here's the problem. When insulin goes up, a different hormone that's on your fat cells, it's actually on your liver cells and your muscle cells as well, but especially on your fat cells, called lipoprotein lipase. That's LPL. That hormone goes up too, and you know what that hormone's job is to do? It welcomes all of that energy into the fat cells as storage. So when your insulin levels go up, you increase the amount of fat that is stored in your body. So now normally that wouldn't be too much of a problem, except that as a society we eat a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of sugar. So our insulin levels stay high all the time. So whenever me and you, we go out for a workout or we need energy, we tend to have so much sugar and glucose. So glucose is the word for sugar. There's so much of it floating around in the blood that we just pull it from the blood when we need energy. The only problem with that is if you are always turning to your high blood sugar levels to fuel your workouts, guess what doesn't happen? Burning body fat. When your insulin levels are high, and remember, insulin goes up when we eat sugar, flour, and starches. When your insulin goes up, we do not tap into body fat for storage or for fuel. So that body fat that got shuffled away in there, it's locked in there and it's not going anywhere. So by constantly eating sugar, we keep insulin levels up and we prevent the body from using the fuel that we have stored away as fat. That's why you get those highs and you lows. You eat a pasta meal, you crash. You eat 2 candy bars, you crash. It's because you're constantly having to replenish that energy supply that's in the blood, because that's all your body knows how to pull from. When you constantly are feeding yourself white flour, white bread, sugars, your body forgets how to go into body fat stores, and you never give it the chance to do that. So that is reason number 1, is that by eating sugar, you mess up your insulin levels and you keep them really high, so we don't get to use body fat for storage. Instead, we're using blood sugar. That's reason number 1. If that hasn't convinced you enough, don't we want to burn off extra body fat stores? That convinced me right there, but I've got 2 more reasons for you. Reason number 2. Sugar as a molecule, when you're eating sugar and it hits the digestive system, sugar is actually a molecule made up of two different sugars, glucose and fructose. So when these hit the body, what happens is glucose heads into the body and it raises blood sugar and it raises insulin, and we'll hold back at what we just talked about. But fructose is an interesting one. It doesn't actually affect blood sugar, but only the liver knows how to deal with all this fructose that's coming in. Only the liver understands how. So all of this fructose is shuttled off to the liver to be broken down. So here is where the problem lies with that. Number one, the liver, as it's processing fructose, it over long term can turn into fatty liver because of having to overwork the liver. Number two, what does the liver do with fructose? Well, it creates a storage form of it so we can store it as fat. Now, that alone is not too bad, but we've also got the other half of our sugar, which is our glucose, which is opening up those fat stores. And then you have the liver over here dealing with the other one, turning it into what we'd like to store. So effectively, the two components of a sugar molecule are making it easy to store body fat. One is creating the fat and the other one is turning on the hormones to store the fat. So sugar is such a troublemaker in this way. So that is something I really want you to think about. The third reason why you might want to kick sugar to the curb is because it has been shown in many, many studies to be addictive. And so many studies if you look at show that there are similar brain pattern activities as when you eat sugar as when someone is able to do cocaine or heroin or have a cigarette. These same addiction pathways are activated. So I want you to think of something. 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago, our version of sweet came naturally from a blueberry or a peach or an apple. We had these natural sweeteners. But with, modern industrialization, we have concentrated that sugar into a super intense molecule that stimulates the brain and the reward center. So what's happening is when you intake sugar, it stimulates that area in the brain that releases a neurotransmitter called dopamine, and dopamine is responsible for that feel good, pleasure feeling. It's that reward of you've done a good job here, this feels really good. So what you're essentially teaching your brain by repeated doses of sugar is that when I consume this molecule, I feel good. So you consume it, you feel good. But just like any other addictive substance, there comes a point where that same amount of sugar doesn't initiate the same amount of dopamine response. You don't get that same pleasure, that same hit. So what do? We know what we do. You eat more sugar. And then you get a higher hit. And then it levels out. So you eat more sugar. So you end up on this escalating problem, this downward spiral of dopamine reward responses in which you're never able to fully keep up because you're always chasing that sugar high, which will never be as intense as the first time that you had it. So that one cupcake's not doing the trick anymore. You need 2 cupcakes, or maybe you need 3 cupcakes, or maybe now you need a box of cookies. So that is the method behind which we stay addicted to sugar. And the problem is, remember how I told you our insulin levels go up? Our insulin levels are also feeding into this system. So essentially, you're eating things that are causing you to crave the things that are bad for you, and it's just a really bad mess. And we get into these, situations in which when we try to come off carbohydrates or try to come off of intense amount of sugars, we go through withdrawals, and this withdrawal process has been shown to last, even as much as 6 weeks of going through withdrawal. And I was writing down some of the symptoms here of what it feels like to come off of sugar, and these sound exactly like what someone might go through if they went through a rehab program. So withdrawal from sugar and carbohydrates, we're seeing weakness, we're seeing fatigue, we're seeing dehydration, we're seeing nausea, we're seeing constipation, we're seeing lowered blood pressure. All of these things start going on when we come off of sugar. And on top of that, you're dealing with that loss of dopamine, so you're feeling down and like you're not getting reward. And the problem is, if we know that this cycle takes 4 to 6 weeks to complete, meaning that's how long it takes to start breaking that addiction to sugar, when is the last time you've made it past that mark? The problem is most of us don't have the emotional coping skills to deal with what comes up emotionally when you take out all those buffers and those things we use to dull our emotions. And I have talked about that extensively on our broadcasts we've done here, so I do encourage you to go and take a look through all those videos that we've done together on, you know, how to deal with cravings, how to deal with trigger foods, and emotionally coping. But the thing is, we never get to see the other side of that 4 to 6 weeks to truly experience the benefits of what it feels like to not have sugar in the diet, to not have the cravings, to not have the bloating, to not have the headaches, to not having the weight gain. So my challenge to you would be, where in your life can you start to cut out the unnecessary sugars? And usually the best place I like to look is liquid sugars, things like fancy coffees, things like pop, things like juice. These are the places that I like to cut out first with clients, and then we move on to looking at the bigger things, like where is the sugar creeping into your diet that you may not even be noticing. So I've got 2 quick things to help you out today to get you started on this process. I mean, if this has piqued your interest, I highly recommend you to check out this book. It's I just finished it. It's called Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It by Gary Taubes. It talks all about the relationship between insulin and, my gosh, like a billion other things I didn't talk about: heart disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancers, all of that kind of stuff. Really good book if you're into reading about that kind of stuff. But if this has convinced you, lovely, you saved yourself some time. Let's get started now. So number 1 I want you to look for is, I want you to try to eliminate foods that have sugar in the first 5 ingredients. So now here's the tricky thing. It's not always going to say sugar, because sugar is sneaky. It's got a whole bunch of different names. So some of the names I was able to find: sugar can be called, obviously, sugar. It can be called sucrose. It can be called fructose. It can be called high fructose corn syrup. It can be just called honey. There are lots of ways sugar comes in. So what I would suggest you do is take a look at your label and your ingredient list. And the reason I ask you to look at the first 5 ingredients is because the order of the ingredients you see on an ingredient list is organized by weight, meaning the first ingredient takes up the largest portion by weight of the food you're eating, and then the second, third, fourth, fifth. So if sugar falls in one of those first 5, you know that it's taking up the majority of the weight of that food, or at least contributing it to it really heavily. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, I'm just going to have to get you to decide ahead of time. If you choose to leave your decisions about things that matter to you up into the moment, I guarantee you your primitive monkey brain will go, you know what? I've been so good this week. I deserve this. I deserve some sugar. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? I had a hard day. You know what we're talking about. All these excuses that come up. Decide ahead of time that, hey, I'm so tired of the body fat that I'm carrying around that doesn't make me feel good. I am sick and tired of headaches, of feeling tired, of feeling fatigued, of all of these things that are associated with the highs and the lows of our hormone responses to sugar. Decide ahead of time. And don't go back on yourself. Keep your word with yourself. Build that relationship with your integrity again. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. Because changing those beliefs you have is all about giving yourself proof. If you want to be someone who makes better health choices, you have to start by making better health choices. Prove it to yourself, because remember, every time you go back on your word with yourself, you're reinforcing your old belief that this is how your life is going to be. So if you want more, you have to actively decide to do it. So that's all I have for you guys today. Again, here, my name is Tanessa. I would love to hear below in the comments, what is your experience with sugar? How is it showing up in your diet? And what are you going to do this week to eliminate sugar from at least something, so that you can step forward into being the better you? You guys, have loved having you here. Have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.